Experimentation is the heart of the scientific method, and companies love to experiment because they want to be scientific. But it's only a very small share of companies that experiment in a way that adds value. Most companies wind up building experiments and executing experiments on very small scale changes, often where it's easy to experiment, not where it's useful or important to experiment. For example, many marketing departments experiment constantly. This is really a function of the fact that a lot of marketing tools have integrated A/B testing capabilities. So at the click of a button, you can experiment on a subject line or a creative. Now, the differences between these versions are often quite small. Maybe they don't need to be tested. And also, it's unclear how the learnings from these tests abstract out. How do we go into production? There's a one-time campaign, we have a certain subject line. How exactly do we now take that learning from an A/B test and make it production? On the other side, big changes, the things you love to test in production, swing for the fences changes, sea changes, we don't usually test those things in companies. Why not? Well, first of all, they're very expensive to test. The versions need to be built. We need engineering resources to actually build the alternative version of the UX or the version of the product or a totally different schema of some kind, right? It takes a lot of resources to build that. So usually when companies build these next versions, these next steps, they do so incrementally. They make changes, they think about what would be better, they make changes, and then they just roll something into production without testing it. Because you're not going to rally your engineering resources, focus them on a problem, and then have something that could actually be thrown away if it doesn't perform as well against core metrics. The second reason is because many companies just don't have the ability, technical ability, to test something in production that they can distribute to different users and customers as they come in. The technical capability to do that is a limiting factor for many companies. So those two reasons are why companies don't experiment where they really should. These areas where there are big potential upside from trying something totally new where you don't know exactly how it's going to result. Now, Hawkwind's inquiry framework is designed to really help guide experimentation, to go through a series of questions to refine and focus an experiment before it goes into production, before it launches. This results in many experiments being culled, which is a good thing, and it also results in having a clear sense and rationale for why we're doing an experiment, what we're hoping to get out of it, and what we're going to be doing next. What's the next step? Once we get the results back, we know what was better, A, B, or C. What are we going to do? What's the next step? We should never experiment in a place where there is no clear next step. That sounds obvious, but it's surprisingly common for companies to execute tests and then nothing happens afterwards. We learn something, maybe, but there's nothing to do. So for every experiment, we want to subject it to rigorous questioning. Just to give you a sense, we're going to name our experiment, and then we're going to go through a number of questions to refine our own understanding of what we're trying to accomplish with the experiment. Let's pretend, this is obviously pretend, we're working on a new product version. And it might be multiple of these, right? Maybe a new product version that is also a user funnel, right? So what is the treatment or feature being tested on? We're doing something new, in this case, a new product version. What do we want to see move? What are we looking to influence, to impact? Let's say customer browse time. And maybe you want to look at customer transaction count. Now, why do we think this feature is going to increase the value of these metrics? There's obviously a reason, right? We're doing it for a reason. The change will make it easier for customers to browse various parts of the catalog, blah, blah, blah. Okay, as long as you think through this, the activity of going through this inquiry is a huge value in and of itself. There's also reasons why it might not work, right? Let's be aware of these. Let's think about the setup, the structure of the test. Let's think about the control allocations. This is not technical. This is just basic setup information that we'll have already thought through. Expected sample sizes. Now, what is the minimum metric delta between the test version and the control version that you would consider a win? All right, well, what's the lift that we're looking for? Is it 2%? Is it 1%? Is it 20%? Let's define it. Also, what's our hypothesis, often referred to as the null hypothesis? What do we think is going to happen? We think the test is going to outperform by 10%. Not only will we go through another 12 or 13 questions here, we'll also end up with a record of metadata about the experiment in the first place. We'll get to the end of this. We'll have a clearer idea for what we're actually doing. We'll also have a record that we can use in the future as a reference for a catalog of experiments, but also we'll have a data set that is AI ready.